Welcome to this EMSWeb training session. During this session, we're going to cover the functionality found under the Checklist Creator tab, which will allow you to create a checklist template. The functionality that we're going to be covering under the Checklist Creator can be found under written guidance as well. The Word document is located under the EMSWeb sitemap and guidance link, which is located on the right-hand side pane under the quick links. This can be found on almost every web page in EMSWeb. So once you use the EMSWeb sitemap and guidance link, scroll down until you find the Checklist Creator hyperlink. Using that hyperlink will download a Word document containing all of the topics that we're going to be talking about under Checklist Creator. So Checklist Creator is used to create your checklist templates. It's found under the Audit Inspection tab and is on the far right side labeled Checklist Creator. So when you go to this tab, it will display all of the current checklist templates that you have. And you have three options for creating new checklist templates. So that's a general, compliance, and an EMS template. Now the ways that these differ is by what options there are in answering the checklist questions. So for a general template, the options are yes, no, and not applicable. For a compliance audit template, the options to answer questions are compliant, non-compliant, and not applicable. For a new EMS template, the options are conform, non-conform, and not applicable. So depending upon what kind of answers you want available to your users, then you have your three choices. Now for the purposes of this example, I'm going to create a compliance template. So when I click on the new compliance audit template, it is going to come up with a form. So when you fill out this form, you're going to give the checklist template a name. So I'll call this Training March 2019 Checklist. So as a general rule of thumb, you want the checklist template name to be descriptive. So you want it the name to include what subject it's covering, EMS, what media, etc., the year of the checklist, because checklists should be maintained and reviewed every year. So then you can change the media. So I'm going to say that this is a hazardous waste one for this example. If you have any specific instructions you want the auditor or the inspector that's filling out this checklist to follow, then you can write them out under this instructions. And then this will be displayed on the checklist for the person who's filling it out. You have options down here for if you want this checklist to be visible, to be shared with other organizations. And these are organizations that belong below your current organization in the hierarchy. So if you're creating this checklist at the region level, then it would be available to everyone, to all the installations that belong to that region. You have the option of automatically numbering each of your questions. So typically, when you create your questions, you can put in a question ID number, but you can also leave it blank and use this option, and then that will automatically number each question in that section. And then under configurable fields, this is a set of pre-made questions that is located at the top of the checklist that you can have them answer or not answer, depending upon your desire. When the checklist is filled out, it automatically retains, or one of the options is for the date of that the checklist was filled out. So you can choose either to just capture the date, or if it's important, the date and time, or the start and end date. Or if you don't want to capture the checklist date that it was filled out, you can select none. So you can choose to put in any of these items that you want to be displayed at the top. So if you do want to capture, let's say, what building the checklist was filled out on, if you want to capture a POC name, and have a text box for additional comments. So those are the three I'm going to choose for this template. So once I save this template, it's going to go to the profile view of this checklist template. Okay, so it's going to take a moment to go ahead and create this checklist template. So the next step, once a checklist template has been created, then is to fill out all of the specific questions for that checklist. Okay, so this is taking a while to load up. So while we wait for this to load up, I am going to patiently wait for it. And the reason it's slow is because my computer is performing an update at the moment. Thank you, NMCI. Okay, so. Okay, so I'm going to refill out these fields. And we'll see if it saves it this time. Okay, so once we have the checklist template profile up, you'll see that we have it takes me directly to the area where I need to fill out the questions for this checklist template. So right now there are no questions and we have various options. So the first one is the new question. And when I click on that, that's going to allow me to directly and manually create a question. So the section header is on the checklist template. All of the questions are broken out by specific sections. So you can create a section just by filling out the section header. So for example, I'm going to say this is manually entered questions. So I'm going to create a section with that name, and then any questions that I enter in with that section header will be displayed there. So item ID, I'm just going to say it's question number 1. Citation code, example, citation code 1. And then you can add in additional reference details and the exact question. So then I'm going to save the question, and then I will now have one question that's available to me on this checklist template. The other way of adding in questions is to use the list builder. So a lot of you will be using this functionality. So if I click Add from List Builder, this is going to take me to the part of EMSWeb that interfaces with all of the List Builder questions. So this is maintained by a separate web application, and so the Navy pays that entity funding every year so that these questions are updated for Navy-specific regions and requirements. So if we look at all of the questions, we can see that there are over 40,000 available list builder questions. And so those are broken out into specific medias, sections within that media, and jurisdictions. So we have federal, Navy-specific list builder questions, questions that are specific to the state or to an OCONUS region. And in some cases, we even have jurisdictions down all the way to specific counties that have unique requirements. So in order to pare down the list builder questions to what you're looking for, you want to use the filter function on the right hand side here. So if you click on the filter, you can search by media chapter. So in this example, I am going to look for hazardous waste questions. And then if I want to further refine it, I can look for a specific section or sections under hazardous waste. So List Builder breaks out all of these into different sections. So I'm going to look for universal wastes, anything dealing with universal hazardous wastes. So you can see that there are still quite a number of these because they're broken out even into even finer detail for containers, notifications, training, etc. So I'm going to select all of them. You could also select the ones that you want just by marking the check boxes. And then for jurisdiction, I'm going to choose, first of all, the team, which covers all of the federal laws. I want to choose all of the Navy specific laws, you know, your so these would be the regulations that are specific to the Navy and not the other services. And then I'm going to pick a specific state. So I'm going to pick Florida, and so this will pick up all of the Florida specific regulations. Okay. If I wanted to, I could further refine it for revision dates. So if I was only looking for the items that have been updated in a specific time frame, I could do so. So then I'm going to click on search. And then EMSWeb will perform a search. So at the top, you could see that it said search begun, and then when it finished, it said search complete. And now you can see that there are 81 checklists, or 81 checklist questions that met my criteria. Okay, so I'm going to select all of these, and I'm do so by selecting the icon on top of the checklist checkbox column. And so by selecting or deselecting this icon, I can mark all of the checklist questions. Then I'm going to click on Add Selected. So if I wanted to, I could pick specific items of interest here and add them. So then you can go ahead and add in a specific section header. Or the other way to add in questions is to click on Add All Questions in the table to your checklist. And so I'm just going to put in a section header of ListBuilder questions. So there are two ways of doing that. You can individually select them, or you can add all of the questions that you filter for at once. And so then you can see that we're looking at the checklist template profile, and under related items, you can see now that we have 82 questions. So if I click here, I can see all of the questions that have been added in. So here's the one I added in manually, and then under a separate section header are all of the 81 ListBuilder questions. So now if I go back to my profile, I have a couple of other options under related items. The first is alerts. And this is a way of sending out an automated alert whenever certain criteria are met when this checklist template is being filled out from an assigned checklist. So if there is, one use of this is like when there is a specific question that is answered that you want to know about, then you can have an email fired off. You can have an automated email get fired off when any question is answered non-compliant. Or you can have it fire off when a specific question is answered in a specific way. So if I said for my first question, if it gets answered non-compliant, then I'm going to have an email get sent. So you can set each individual question that you want, and then at the bottom you specify who that email gets sent to. So that has to be an existing EMSWeb person. And so in this case I'll send it to myself and then send a message saying on this checklist the question number 1 was answered non-compliant. And when the automated email goes out, it will include a link that goes to the checklist that was filled out that generated this or triggered this alert. So you save the alert on the checklist template and it gets applied to any checklist that gets filled out from that template. You can add in more than one alert as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the profile, or I could have hit finish there. And we also have the ability to add in custom fields. So these are questions that reside at the top that that are different than the pre-populated list of questions that were available to me when I created the checklist template. So if I wanted to add in a specific custom question at the top of the checklist, then I would click on the new custom field, and then I would just put in what that custom field name. What was the weather? Okay, so it's really easy to create custom fields. Okay, so then I've created off my questions, set up my alerts, set up any possible custom fields. Now I'm going to preview this. And so that opens up in a new tab, and it will show me exactly what it will look like when it is being filled out by a user. So you can see here is the custom field that I entered in. Here is the additional comments that I marked as being added, as well as the building. Here are the instructions that I entered when I created the checklist template. And then here are the questions that I have available to me. So the user can mark compliant, non-compliant, or NA. These are little buttons that they can mark on. You'll notice that citation and comments are both hyperlinked. And the idea here is the user can enter in comments when they're filling it out, and when they do that, this would expand into a large text box that they can then manually type in their comments for that question. You'll notice that for the list builder questions that I added in, it has the citation code. So here are all the references for that citation. And then I can click on the citation code and get additional reference information. So this was all information that was created by ListBuilder for this specific question. From the preview, you can also print out the checklist. So you can either print out or export it. So you can do the default report, which is how it's being viewed here, or you can expand all of the citation text and save it so that all of that is displayed as well. So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and do the report with all citation text. And then for Internet Explorer, it allows me to either print it, I can send it off to PDF. So I have the options of either printing or saving. The Expand All Citations button up here, if I use that, then it will go through all of the questions and expand that citation reference information. Okay, so I'm going to click back to the checklist template profile. And the last thing I want to show you on this profile is the ability to export the questions themselves. So if I click on the questions, that brings me to the list of questions that I have for the checklist template. And then a few of the buttons that I have available are to update the existing list builder questions. This will check the list builder set of questions for any questions that exist on your checklist template that has been updated. And then if it has been updated, it will replace the existing question with the updated version. I can create and update a checklist template with selected questions. So this will allow me to check mark specific questions and then create a second checklist template with only those questions. So this is very handy if I want to create a checklist template that only contains a subset of the existing questions. But the thing I want to show you is this function up here for import and export questions. So if I click on this, this will allow me to export the questions to Excel. Okay, so this page has the functionality to export and then re-import the question. So I'm going to run the export for this specific checklist. So the button says Run Export for Training March 2019 Checklist. And then it allows me to either open it up or save it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, and I'm going to call this Checklist Questions Export Training. Okay, so now I'm going to open up that saved Excel spreadsheet. And then the basic idea here is that now that I've exported the questions, I'm going to go ahead and update all of the questions as needed. So this is a handy way of updating the existing questions. So I can update the question text, the category or section header, the item ID, the citation code, and the reference details. So if I don't like the information that ListBuilder had, I didn't like the way that the questions are cited, or I wanted to change some of the reference information or anything along those lines, I can do that real quickly in Excel. So let's say I update this first question. So this has been an updated question. And I can also add questions to this checklist template as well. The one thing I can't do is delete questions. Do note that this is also a quick way of creating the questions as well. I could have, when I first created my checklist template, I could have gone to the questions and exported a blank Excel spreadsheet here, and then filled it out by copying and pasting from any existing sources that I had for my checklist. So then I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go back here and I'm going to re-import it into EMSWeb. So I'm going to click on Browse, and then this will open up the window where I can choose which file to re-import. So let's see, I think it went under sample documents. Yeah, there it is. Oops, I still have it open, so I'm going to close this. So here's that file that I updated. So I'm going to select that. It shows up in the box. Then I'm going to import it. So you can only import Excel files that were exported. So that file is tagged specifically for this checklist template. So that's the only file that can be imported for this checklist template. And so then it will go through and make any of the corrections or updates that it finds in that Excel spreadsheet and update it under your question list. So under this first question, you can see that it was updated. So I could have just as easily updated all of the questions. So when I go to Checklist Creator, this will display all of the checklist templates that I have. And one thing I can do on this checklist template is I can make it shared. And then that will allow any child organizations to view this shared checklist template and use it. If I want to see which ones are being shared to this organization, I would click on the Show Shared. And then if there are any checklist templates that were shared, they would show up here, and I would be able to click into them. I could copy them to my organization and then update. So it is possible to copy and share checklist templates from one organization to another. If you don't have access to the organization that you want to share or copy a checklist template from, you can use the Get Support button and request that it be done for you.